Hey folks, welcome to the show. This is the Counter Clipping stream for August 15th, 2022. We are coming to you live from the new Argos Lair Game Studios here. I released a video of the room the other day, and it's kind of in its configuration now, but it was not a video that I could have released, that I could have shown on the stream because the video ended up being too long. So there's a limit within StreamYard of how big the videos can be, and it's a lower limit than what I had. So I'd like to welcome everybody to the show. Tonight we are clipping the 6 Days of Glory. That is this 1997 release from Clash of Arms and designer Kevin Zucker. Now this is part of the Days series, which is related to the Campaigns of Napoleon system, which is a better known system in part because a couple of the games in that series were released back in the day by Avalon Hill, so they got a lot of exposure in that sense. So I'll explain a little bit about the shelf methodology, which is still evolving, in part because I don't have all the shelves back yet. So there's one big shelf stuck at the house, at the old house, and there is in addition, because of the way the other room ended up being configured, I'm going to need to buy an additional shelf from IKEA. So what we have here are 4 Kallax bookcases. There's a 3x4, a 2x4, a 3x3, and a 2x2. There need to be 2 3x4s and 2 2x4s. So the 3x4 is coming from the old place, and the 2x4 has to come from IKEA because the 2x4 that was going to go there is actually in the office that is over there right now. And we'll see if I can get another video set up. So I may release the video, the additional post configuration space, but I mean, honestly, this is still in flux. So nothing is in its final configuration at this time. Now, the shelves behind me right now pretty much hold GMT exclusively, other than the OSG stuff that's up here that you can't really see in this particular shot. So those might get moved. We'll see, or I might keep them here. I'm not yet sure. But the basic idea for this wall is that it's going to be half War Games, which will be GMT, and half RPGs. So we will see how all that works. So autofocus, if autofocus is jumping around, it is because I am moving too much. Let me remind everybody that you should please like the video. If you are not yet subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. John Longshore, thank you so much for the help. It is much appreciated. Super chats and super stickers are on. It is a way to show your appreciation for the content, but also a way to make sure I don't miss your question if you have a question. We are drinking a Manhattan. I've never made a Manhattan before tonight, and it is kind of terrible. So I don't know if that's me. I don't know if it's old vermouth, but it's kind of terrible, and I'm not enjoying it. But I'm going to drink it anyway because I paid for this liquor. So, and it is a double. So before we get any further, let's say hello to Mike Anthony, Carl Creeder from the Wargame Bootcamp, James Whitmer, John Longshore, of course, is in the house, as we've discussed, Charles Latora. We've got a lot of discussion from these guys. Christopher Prest, John Clark, Jeff Anderson, Matt Taylor, Kilroy, if Kilroy was here, Daniel Silverthorne, Ken X or Ken 10, Daniel Barney, Iggy Crichtal, the legendary Fucko, Bill Simone, Vince Ree, Paul O'Farrell, Ed Holtzman, Tim Zales, Lind Pratt from sunny Central Ohio, Agray Day. We're having a scrolling problem now. Rooney Armendariz, Stephen Roberts, let's see, John C. from the sunny Philippines, who has apparently had balut last night. We wish him well for his recovery. Brian Gash, David Imperato, Fast Hines, Tom Borman, Tom Hall, Jason W. Stigler is in the house. Yes, indeed. Great Battles of the American Civil War is indeed proudly represented. I should mention that there is actually one line of GMT products that is not going to go on the shelves behind me, and that is Great Battles of History. That's going to go on the shelves in the other room. Did I miss anybody? Andrew Cook from Iowa, if I haven't gotten you yet. Scott Bell, welcome back to the stream. William Bird, not sure if I've missed you. Block Oddity. is back. Melissa Kirsch, who is my sister. My family has become aware of these YouTube videos that I have been producing for 9 years. So they are finally aware of it. Matt Davidson, Jeffrey Wesovich, Jacob Guernsey, Manders, Garrison Venn, John Stanley, Andrew Franca, Chad Kennedy, Abraxas _ Patrick of Patrick's Tactics and Tutorials, and John from Half-Assed Gaming. I think we got everybody. Maybe, hopefully we didn't miss anybody. I don't like to use the YouTube function of show the active people in the chat because it's really not accurate. So let's oh, awesome. Christopher Press now has an online opponent for Der Weltkrieg. So Der Weltkrieg, the Der Weltkrieg stuff that was on the shelves behind me last time is now in the office. And I don't have any pictures to show off, but I will get a video up on that. I am pleased to report that we are fully functional video-wise this week. We have this stream tonight, which I didn't miss one. We have the stream on Dan's channel tomorrow at No Enemies Here, so check that out. And we have a Traveler Tuesday video and an unboxing video scheduled for the week. So this is outstanding, and it is progress. I also have at least one or two other videos that are basically filmed that just need to be edited, that I just have not had time to do the editing on because they require a little more editing than just the unboxing video, which in this case, if you watch the Traveler Tuesday video anyway, you'll see the part that I had to cut out where the cat clawed the shit out of me. So that is just a thing that was happening. So yes, I now do, by the way, have all of the great Battles of the American Civil War series from GDW. I have a few of the SPI modules, but not all of them. And I don't feel like I need, for example, Terrible Swift Sword, right? I have 3 Days of Gettysburg, and Bob Kowalczyk, thank you so much. The support is much appreciated. I didn't feel like I needed Terrible Swift Sword, but I did pick up, even though I have Twin Peaks. So Twin Peaks here covers South Mountain and Cedar Mountain, both of which are pretty interesting battles. And Cedar Mountain was covered in the old SPI Cedar Mountain, which was a release in Strategy and Tactics magazine. So if you... My intention in picking up the old one was, I had it back in the day, and I kind of regret getting rid of it. So, Patrick, you haven't seen the other room yet. So wait to the other room, where the other room, you'll see a very good position being given to both GBOH and GCACW. And Achilles, welcome back to the stream. So... Bob Kowalczyk says he has a 2.5mm clipper, but it seems too wide. Do you mean that it seems to clip too wide, or it's a much bulkier clipper than this? Because there is a deluxe model clipper that is the one that I don't recommend because it is largely made of plastic and tends to break. So, yeah, I put about... I even threw the first one away and made a second one. And just putting less bitters in it did not help at all. So we'll be trying an old-fashioned next time, which will not be tonight, by the way. Certainly I have plenty. I feel like I have plenty of booze, so that was justified. Iggy Cricktal. So our topic tonight, by the way, is wargaming in limited space, which is one reason why this came up. Because, so as I mentioned, this is related to the campaigns of Napoleon's system, which... just drop that on the floor, which vary in size, right? There's a couple of, at least 3 map games in that series, and there's a couple of 1 map games in that series. But they also have a significant number of off-map displays. The Fog of War mechanic is basically off-map displays for everything. So even if you are playing the 1 map game, say, and the one that I have is the Emperor Returns, which is what you think it is. It's the Waterloo campaign. It's got a beautiful Rick Barber map too. But it's got, like another half a map worth of off-map displays, because there's like every corps has an off-map display. So it might even be every division. So This one, however, the day, and I'm not sure that this applies to the other games in the Days system or not, because the only other one I have is actually up there. It's 1806 Rossbach Avenged, which is the Jena Auerstadt campaign of 1806. And I haven't checked it yet to see, but 6 Days of Glory does not have off-map displays. Now, 6 Days of Glory is essentially the same campaign that is covered by La Patrie en Danger, which is the grand tactical game in the Library of Napoleonic Battles series, and also the same campaign that is covered in the classic Napoleon at Bay, which I also have, and which, now that I think about it, might also be one map. But although I had remembered that it was two, I might be wrong about that. So, as has already been mentioned in the chats, the easiest way to mitigate a lack of space, and there's a couple different ways to judge footprint, right? On the one hand, you have, how much physical space. Bob, thank you again. Bob, I hope so, because we have the games here. So I do intend to get a dehumidifier. Basically, anybody with a basement in Ohio ought to have a dehumidifier in the basement. So we will be doing that. And once that gets done, and I'm also reasonably sure that I've identified what is causing a little bit of water pooling above, next to the foundation in that space, and it's a downspout that's on the front of the house, and that appears to me to be a remediable problem with even the minimal amount of home repair skill that I may happen to have. So we're going to stop. And now I haven't had any problems so far, although the sump pump took a while to come on, like the first day we were here, and I was like, I don't know what's going on here. This is kind of filling up, and I just like unplugged it and plugged it back in an effort to fool with it, and it did start working. So as of this moment, we appear to be okay. And as of that downspout problem, like I said, it's reasonably sure that pulling, just putting an extension on the downspouts coming off the gutters, and drawing that water away from the house, which is also coincidentally downhill, will basically solve that problem completely. And it's all going to be like hidden by the plants, so it's gonna be fine. So anyway, yeah, we keep bringing up Balut because I'm blaming John for this. So if you look up Balut and are absolutely mortified at what you see, it is not my fault. I disavow all responsibility for that. So we may eventually stop sipping on that. We'll see. So this is in a 1-inch box too, so there's no way we're going to get a counter tray in it. So I might be able to get a counter tray in it, thinking about it, but it make the box bulge, and that makes the box not sit right on the shelf, and I don't like that. So I will be bringing you further reports on any concerns of moisture, but right now everything appears to be okay. So. But I'm gonna leave the computer where it's at for the moment, which is in this larger room, because immediately behind the computer is two 6.5 or 6 by 2.5 foot folding tables put together, and it is an adequate play area for the moment. And I can't even wall the area off yet, so it's kind of academic at this exact time. So one way to mitigate a lack of physical space, at least, and to some extent time as well, is just to play on Vassal, right? You buy Atlantic Wall and you don't have the space for Atlantic Wall. Well, just do it on Vassal. The Vassal module. Now, not every game boasts a great Vassal module, but many of the larger games that we talk about here do. So I'm perfectly happy to employ Vassal in that way, and on those 2.5 by 6, I keep wanting to say 6.5 by 2, 2.5 by 6 foot folding tables, which is a pretty standard folding table size. If you go to like Sam's Club or Costco is where I got mine. Those are the ones you're going to find. And they're, I don't know, 40 or $50. I think the last one I bought was like $40. You can get up to a 4-map, assuming there's no to minimal off-map displays or any other things that will take up table footprint. You will be able to get a 4-map game on that size table. There are certain So, Carl, one of the things that you can do to help mitigate the size of the Atlantic Wall module is have plenty of RAM in the computer. However, you also need to make sure you're using 64-bit, the 64-bit client. Now, the current Vassal installations actually come bundled with Java, so make sure you get the 64-bit client. But then there's a maximum memory for the Java virtual machine setting inside Vassal, and you have to increase that as well by 2 to 4 times, something like that. Rob Johnson, so go to Limey Yank Games to look for Vassal modules for the Library of Napoleonic Battles. Why they are there and not mostly on the Vassal site is a mystery to me. I do not know. But most of the games in that series do, in fact, have Vassal modules. You just have to go to Limey Yank Games to get them. William Aarons, thank you so much. Very much appreciated. So I'm told that Kilroy has more than I do. I've got roughly 400 games, but that's a little deceptive because I have 6 boxes. So I use those banker boxes to move. I have 6 of those full of ASL. It's absolutely bananas. So yes, this is exactly what I am talking about. This helps a lot with large modules if you're not already doing that. That said, Atlantic Wall is still really big, and it's still going to take a little while to load, but it probably won't take half an hour, which is what it was doing for me under the old configuration. So, Brant, somebody may have already answered this for you. This is the module implementation, but corollary to that is that it is just an enormous game too, right? It's like a 7-mapper. It's got like 3,600 counters, so it's a lot, right? So the engine does have to deal with a lot to handle that. Also, this is a thing I have seen. Now, Decision is not the only people I've seen this from, okay? I've seen this from, shall we say, another game company from whom I buy a considerable amount of games. So that's not a problem unique to Decision. And I don't know what kind of mechanism Decision uses to organize the building of their Vassal modules. I'm guessing they're not paying anybody. I could be wrong. Maybe they are. That's mostly true. And thus, I don't necessarily feel comfortable criticizing lazy module designers that didn't clean up all the detritus that they left behind, right? I have not generally observed that Decision's Vassal modules are particularly low quality. I'm not saying they never are, but the ones that I have handled, which is mostly Goss, also Cobra. I'm not sure if I've fooled with the Vassal module for Desert Fox Deluxe. I know one of Stigler's favorite games, but the I haven't really noticed, and I've got Vassal modules for like 2 or 3 magazine games too, and I haven't really noticed that I thought any of them were particularly terrible. The biggest problem that I had was like the Goss ones, where the module was just so large that it significantly impacts performance. Phil Hatfield, welcome to the stream. I haven't seen you in quite a while. Phil is the fella that introduced me to great campaigns of the American Civil War. And on that subject, we have finally placed, because we could do that today, an order for the new issue of The Skirmisher from Multiman. So that ought to be making its way here soonish. No particular hurry. There's no scenarios in this issue, and there's no counters or anything like that. It's just articles. I am sure I will do a video on it when it arrives. And it looks good if you are a fan of the Great Campaigns of the American Civil War system. The big thing that it includes is a streamlined campaign framework for Atlanta is Ours, which I am curious to see. Now, vassal modules with no scenario setups in them, first of all, are lame. There's nobody that's going to argue with that. Marty Sample is back. Welcome back, Marty. So he says he doesn't own very many decision games. I mean, I don't. I've got a decent number, but I'm counting magazine games in that total as well. So because of the way I count stuff, I do count magazine games as individual games, but I don't count expansions. So, for instance, I don't know where it went. Red Storm Baltic Approaches is down here. I don't count that. That's literally not even in my spreadsheet because it is a non-standalone expansion for Red Storm. Now, on the other hand, we have one of the standalones for Flying Colors, Blue Cross White Ensign, which is the Russian Imperial Navy and Sweden, I believe, in the Age of Sail. More interesting topic than you might think. Now, I do count that because it is a standalone game. On the other hand, what this means is that like all those ASL boxes that take up 6 banker boxes to move, those count as, I count ASL twice. I count one ASL starter kit as one entry and ASL, full ASL as another entry because they're independent games. So that is skewing my totals considerably. I am right around 400 games, given those caveats in mind. So that's a lot, but Kilroy says he's got more, and I'm going to take his word for it. That is okay. I probably should have less than I do, to be blunt. You can't play them all, right? And I'm, leaning heavily into series games rather than individual games, which doesn't mean I won't play or buy individual games, because of course I still will. And of course, there's still plenty of stuff that is of interest to me that is coming out rather than already out. So I'm not quite understanding the color schemes here. There appear to be 2 different colors for Russians and 2 different colors for French, but they're very hard to distinguish in this admittedly not that awesome lighting that I have in here. We're working on the Russians at the moment, and we're almost done. I'll tell you what, the Vassal, unless you're talking about building modules, which is a whole thing, right? If you're just talking about using Vassal in play, while there is a learning curve, most of it is just kind of the muscle memory. And we've talked about this before too. One of the downfalls of Vassal, the areas where improvement would be appreciated, is a lack of standard counter commands, like, flip the counter over, for example, linked to standardized hotkeys. That would be much appreciated. As it is, that is infrastructure that has to be built in every module. Some modules have a robust right-click context menu. Some do not. Some modules have, scenario setups. Some do not. This is the reality of most of these Vassal modules are not done by people who got paid to do the Vassal module. They got done by unpaid volunteers, and therefore it's really hard to mount a significant criticism of them for maybe features that they don't have or didn't conform to the community standards. Vassal programming building a module is a pretty code light effort. I mean, most of the work is going to come in just organizing the art assets. So, I mean, you can certainly, there are also, let me point out that there are also game systems that are very amenable to small footprint play, right? ASL is one of them. There's huge number of scenarios that are 1 or 2 boards. Those have a very small map footprint. And while I won't say you're not eating any space, that's not the map. You're not eating very much. And generally, a 1 or 2 map board scenario is also not going to take you 15 hours to play, although some of them will. Not loving it. Not loving it. It's boozy. There's that. So Vasa is built from Java. So, but you don't necessarily need to know a lot of Java to build a module. Now, some like advanced functionality and automation, that's different. But to just put a basic Vassal module together, I'm not sure you really need any code ability at all. Legalities creating a Vassal module. I'm not going to tell you. So I'm going to tell you to contact an attorney if you're concerned about it. I will observe, however, that most publishers don't have a problem with it. Some do. For example, DVG, is it DVG that sells Vassal modules for money? Not a fan of that practice, but free country, they can do that if they want, and if people are paying them for it, I guess okay. Then again, DVG does a lot of solitaire stuff for which there isn't necessarily an obvious use for Vassal, right? Other than save space and setup and all that, right? So I started making Vassal module at one point for Decision Storm of Steel, and was not thrilled at the prospect of manually creating 1,600 counters. Let me put it that way. Iggy Crichtal says Steve Jackson doesn't want modules for their games. That's fine by me because I don't play any board games from Steve Jackson Games. I have a fondness for their RPG products. On which I presume they don't mind people playing on tabletop. It's interesting because Steve Jackson Games was, kind of a leader early on in having a website, and they were at one point. This was probably more complicated than I'm making it sound, but Steve Jackson Games was at one point an internet service provider. That may have been a separate company, but they were associated with Steve Jackson Games at one point, to kind of, I don't want to say Luddite status, but to a company that seems behind the curve in many ways in terms of digital availability of their games. So Storm of Steel is a Steve Jackson Games does do war games, and they always have. I believe One Page Bulge is even still available, or at least was relatively recently. Now, that's kind of a small novelty piece, and I won't argue with that. But they also did Raid on Iran and a number of war games. They haven't done any big war games. All their war games have been small to extremely small footprint things. But yeah, and I'm not counting. I mean, you can if you want, but I'm not even talking about Ogre and stuff like that. I'm talking about like historical war games. They absolutely have. That was not the FBI. It was the Secret Service. There is an article about that. If you just Google Steve Jackson Games Secret Service raid, you'll get the whole story. That was the Secret Service, and there was a big lawsuit about it, which Steve Jackson Games won. You can, in fact, fight the man and win, especially when the man is bumblingly incompetent, as it was in that case. So ADG, Australian Design Group, does not. I think they will sell you the modules, but you also get the modules for free if you buy the games. So there's that. So we've talked about this before. There is a sense in some people that somehow making a game available on Vassal somehow cannibalizes the sales of the game. There isn't a shred of evidence to support that assertion, and I think substantial circumstantial evidence that having a Vassal module available for a game increases its sales, because there are people who can't play a game unless it's on Vassal for whatever reason, right? So Alan Salazar, welcome back to the stream. Am I missing? Oh, Chad Kennedy is just getting into the Labatai series and wonders what he's getting himself into. So on the one hand, it's a whole can of worms, right? Eventually, I would like to do Labatt content, and I have some info in mind to get somebody that knows what they're doing on the show to talk about it. That's just kind of a deprioritized channel priority at this exact moment. So there are also like games with their own individual platforms, like the World at War has this War Planner software that's its own thing, and which looks well designed. I've never used it. I don't know. That's a guess based on screenshots that I've seen, but it does not look that bad. So, and as Stigler points out, when you play it, we're having focus problems. When you play a game face to face, only one person has the game. But not everybody doesn't have their own copy of the game unless you're crazy like us. So, miniature war games. Yes, my advice is exactly the same as it is for board war games, which is to find a digital tabletop. In this case, however, that digital tabletop is Tabletop Simulator, which is better at doing miniatures and looks better at doing miniatures than Vassal does. I'm a Vassal guy because the kinds of games that I like to play are supported on Vassal much more than they are supported on Tabletop Simulator. I think we're going to bag the Russians at this time. So, I mean, there are also certain miniatures games that you can kind of play on a little bit smaller footprint space. Necromunda is the one that springs to mind. There are also probably other examples, but I am not your go-to source for information on miniatures games. Yeah, I'm not really enjoying it. I'll take a few more sips, but frankly, it's probably going in the sink like the other one. It could be that my vermouth is just no good. The bottle's probably a few years old, frankly, and vermouth does not stay good forever. On the other hand, it's not going to poison me because there's a lot of booze in it, but it doesn't taste good. Like I said, we will have. I have I have been drinking scotch and or bourbon and or I even had rum on the channel one night for quite a long time, and I am normally if it's not worth drinking neat guy if it's not worth drinking, but I wanted something different tonight, and I'm just not feeling it here. I've had Manhattans before that were decent. This just isn't. So Chad Kennedy has picked up the new La Bataille de Mont Saint Jean from Clash of Arms. I do feel like we should all be very thankful that a company like Clash of Arms is still with us, right? They are, a very boutique wargame publisher. They have had their share of issues with development and with component quality and things like that. But at the same time, they also had, in a lot of ways, really good component quality, more so than some other larger publishers. So Jägermeister, it is possible for you to make a cocktail with Jägermeister and it'll be okay. Brandy Alexander is pretty good, I gotta say. It's not a drink I'd like to drink a lot of because I'd probably get nauseous. But Clash of Arms website has not. It's a primitive website. It's a website worthy of the 90s. So both this and The Emperor Returns and what's the other one? The Eagles Turn East that I have, which is the Eylau and Friedland campaigns in maybe late 1806, but definitely early 1807. And The Emperor Returns is a really nice Rick Barber map. So I do have Gringo, and I believe there was an expansion for Gringo as well, which is in that box. There are not a lot of games on the Mexican War. Not zero, but there's not many. Yes, Brand is right. The actual listings haven't changed in quite a while, unless they updated. Unless they updated it in the last month or two, just to account for the fact that they have a new game out, which is possible. Which is La Bataille de Mount St. Jean. So, and it's nice that it's the counters are nice. I'm sure the map is nice. I'm sure the map is on a really high quality paper. It always is for Clash of Arms. I have issues with the rules and with the practice of putting needed information to resolve comp or whatever it is on the backs of the counter. That is not a practice that I like. So I am taking Brant's word for it here. I just haven't checked it because there's no reason for me to go to Clash of Arms' website. Halls of Montezuma is a point-to-point game on the Mexican War, as Perfidious Albion mentions. It did not get a good reception when it came out, but it may be a thing that was fixed in a revised rule book, because there were a few games like that. Alan Salazar, if you're referring to Curio Regia or whatever it's called, so there is a older GMT game called 30 Years War. But the one that's on P500 right now is not that. It is an entirely new game. It has a gorgeous map, and that's just a prototype. So I have not ordered that, but chances are quite high that I am going to end up ordering that. Cuyus Regio, yes, or Regio. This is the game that I'm talking about. Now, the old 30 Years War, I believe, was another point-to-point CDG type game. Back in the day when it did appear to many that point-to-point CDGs were the wave of the future, and that's how things were going to go. It turned out that was a fad and has more or less not developed that way. There's a lot of other types of mechanisms that are floating around now besides that one. But a lot of those, CDG, point-to-point CDGs from GMT specifically are really good games, right? Right. I'm going to do that. Keep doing that right there. There's a couple of them right there. For the People and the Napoleonic Wars. One by Mark Herman, one by Mark McLaughlin. They're both excellent games. Truthfully, I think For the People and Paths of Glory, which is also on the shelf here, are among the best 5 best card-driven games. So, yeah. So Gringo is what it sounds like. It is tactical battles at the regimental level, presumably, of the Mexican War. Unless it's different than the rest of the games in the series, and I have no reason to assume that it is. The rest of the series is all regimental level. So I'm very pleased that I managed to get a copy of River of Death, which is an absolute bitch to find. So eventually, hopefully, GDW, that'd be nice. GMT will redo it, but in the meantime, I don't have to wait for it. And it is one of my favorite Chickamauga is one of my favorite Civil War battles, and I think one of the most fascinating battles. I think it's a more interesting battle in a lot of ways than any battle in the East, with the possible exceptions of Antietam and Gettysburg, which is not saying a lot, really. But in a way, the closest big Civil War battle that came the closest to a Napoleonic decisive victory was Chickamauga, and not Gettysburg or Antietam. The first place I would look for old GMT product is Enterprise Games. So I will tell you that happily. And obviously we've got a lot of GMT goodies on our shelves. I'm going to the office on Wednesday, and I just didn't want to deal with it anymore. I felt like a bit like a ragamuffin, and I probably will get a haircut on assuming I have time on Wednesday as well. Or maybe I'll do that. I don't know. We'll see if I do that. James Whitmer, when do I think the wreath print of Three Dog will be coming out? So our comrade Stigler is the person to ask about that. He is closer to the ground, certainly, than me on that. But I am told that it is being worked on, that it is not going to be a straight reprint. There is going to be a general lifting of the entire game to the standards of the new rules, the new maps, the new counters, as well as a complete reevaluation of the scenarios, which is the big game. So there are two problems I have with Three Dog. It's an excellent game. There's also a couple of preference things about Three Dog that you just kind of need to be aware of. One is that there's a very poor scenario selection. That is the problem with Three Dog. There is a day one scenario, a day two scenario, a day three scenario, and you start the day one scenario and play through the whole thing if you want. There might be one additional scenario, but there is no scenario that you can play on like partial maps or anything like that. That's a huge problem for a game that it's a pretty big. I mean, it's Gettysburg at the regimental level. It's a large game. It's going to take you a while to play. An annoying thing is that it does not come with markers to support the optional ammunition rules. I had to cannibalize those markers out of the only other game I had at the time. I think that was punched was Twin Peaks, and that's a problem. I would never want to play GB ACW without the ammunition and fatigue rules. I don't think fatigue is optional, but ammunition is. I would never want to play without it. Brant, so I'm gonna mention that this is true of almost every tactical game. Okay, there are engagements in ASL that are modeled by ASL that take 4 hours to play that took 5 minutes in real time. So while this is true, it is a sophistry to try and hold that against it, right? This, depending on scale, that is going to be true of a great number of war games. So, I mean, it is going to take you a while to play, right? It's going to take you. It took us. We played through about a day and a half of it, and it took several months to do 3 or 4 months to do that. Now, Most Fearful Sacrifice is, I haven't turned that up, by the way. It's got to be in another box or a tote or something like that, which means it's probably in the garage. And that was one I kind of wanted to get to a table, and the only reason it didn't make the short list was because it didn't fit in the short list box. So that's playable in a much shorter amount of time, but it's not at the same scale either, right? The complexity level is noticeably lower, and it's not the same scale. It's kind of like a demi-brigade scale. It's not exactly what it is. A brigade will typically be like 2 or 3 counters, right? As opposed to in Three Dog, where it might be 6 or maybe even 8, depending on how the exact brigade we're talking about. So we're almost done with the French here. And then it's on to a pretty small number of Prussians. So, I mean, so that fact is going to bother some people, and that's fine. That's just a play preference thing, right? Some people like quick games. Some people like big games. Either one is perfectly valid. I happen to, generally speaking, like larger games. That is, I'm not saying, Brant, I'm not saying you're wrong. It does play slower than real time, but again, that doesn't mean anything when it's typical of games in its class. So I am trying to parse this question. Long decision-making turn. I'm not sure. So to some extent, yeah, this is certainly true of the most of the games I play, even from a system standpoint. It's definitely true of it's true in the sense that each turn is a puzzle. For games certainly like OCS, definitely like GBACW, also like GCACW. Um, the I guess what I'm hung up on here is long. I mean, so the turns in GBACW for a big battle like Gettysburg do take a long time. It might take us. We're having focus problems again. It might take us 4 to 6 hours to play through a turn at the beginning of the first day, the second day at Gettysburg. Now that's going to change based on the amount of stuff on the map, right? At the beginning of Gettysburg, which is a great advantage of Gettysburg games specifically, is that it's a meeting engagement, and that is if it starts at the traditional time where it's Heath's guys coming up against Buford's guys on the road, then those turns are going to go very quickly, and setup will go very quickly because there's going to be 12 counters on the map or something like that, as opposed to more of a set piece battle like Chickamauga, where you're going to start with more stuff on the map. What's the other game? Dead of Winter, which is Stones River / Murfreesboro, has an optional scenario that is the meeting engagement scenario where you could play it as a meeting engagement as well. And we did, if you watch Pat Mullen and I's playthrough of that game, we liked it. We both loved it. Although I think there was, if we're going to get a new version of that, it would be kind of cool to see those scenarios get another development pass. Let me put it that way. So, well, you can see, so Stigler, you can assure us of this because you built the modules, and Stigler does excellent Vassal modules and is very responsive. If you find a problem, you can literally just yell at him, "Hey, Stigler, fix this," and he'll fix it. The old Gauss modules did not have scenario setups, and that just sucks. I mean, and those games are an absolute bitch to set up too. Or just because of size, right? I mean, you can actually play. You could get a meaningful chunk of the way. So I've got this 2-map table set up right now, right? And I could set up a 3-map scenario of Atlantic Wall and just stop when I reach the end of the map, right? And that's going to be probably 2 to 3 weeks into the campaign at least. So I can get a good chunk of the way into something like Atlantic Wall on 2 folding tables. There's a decent amount of off-map stuff in Atlantic Wall, but some of it goes away after a while too, right? You've got these displays for the beaches. Those will go away for the beach maps will go away when the beaches are cleared. You've got these airborne displays. Those will go away certainly when you withdraw the airborne divisions, which you need to do at some point. And once the drops are done, which is done on, I think the last gliders come in on the 7th, something like that. A Yoo-Hoo might taste better. I've got the scotch in the other room. I've just got nowhere to dump it. Is it getting better? Nope, it's really not. It's really not. I think I'm done with it though. I did see this on Facebook. Yes, I think that's a crazy price. I was totally unwilling to pay that. So this is not the same question as GBACW played this way, okay? Because one series is tactical and the other is operational. And the fact is that scenario-specific rules aside, which there are sometimes to reflect these things, you are generally ignoring supply and ammunition in the basic game scenarios. You are using them in the advanced game scenarios, but those are, kind of campaign scenarios. I would not want to play GCACW campaigns or advanced scenarios without those rules. But if you're just playing the basic scenarios, I mean, where they probably is only going to last 1 to 3 days, then you can safely ignore those things. So Brant is not an American Civil War guy for whatever reason. He likes the science fiction games like the Cold War Gone Hot stuff. So Farshad Niazi, welcome back to the stream. We're in the basement right now. I hope it doesn't sound too echoey. There's quite a bit more stuff in the room than there was when we did the show last week. I feel like it's less echoey, but it's still a little bit echoey. And I think I'm going to put a rug down, which will mitigate that. And then when we get the office actually closed up and we're broadcasting in there, then I will start putting up things like acoustic tile. So that is John, this is an excellent game. Abraxas MF says it's much better, echoes much better than last week. It sounds like it to me. So Jeff Beeler, welcome back to the stream. So this is an outstanding game, and I'm not sure if you can see it from the frame, but it's right here. You cannot see it, but it is just out of frame. And that's one I was thinking about setting up. What I'm thinking about setting up is actually this, because I can kind of put it in that closed office and just close the door, keep the cats out of that. Let's face it, I've got plenty of one map stuff I could be setting up. I almost did the Emperor Returns this week for the show, and even though it's also one map, one counter sheet. So it's a different system, though. It is not the days system. It is the actual straight campaigns and Napoleon system. So it's a little heavier on the footprint than this is, because this does not have the off-map force displays where the campaigns and Napoleon games all do. Now, on the other hand, I've got 100 Days Battles, which is a mini campaigns of Napoleon game as well, that I could set up on, any table that you could think of. There's let me riff off of this for a second. So this is true, but this is true of a number of other topics as well, right? I mean, you could say that this is true of ancients if you want. There's if you're talking about ancients games revolving around Alexander or ancient Roman stuff, there's a lot of fascinating history and fascinating characters involved there. The big difference is, it's we as Americans, it is our history, right? We're relatively close to it. It was 170 years ago, 160 years ago. So it's not ancient history, right? And it's super, super, super easy to research for anybody. You don't need to have access to a research library to do research on the American Civil War. You kind of do for ancient stuff, and frankly, for a lot of Napoleonic topics as well. So, there's tons of Napoleonics. Now, I mean, we may not be as familiar with them, but that is part of the materials thing that I just mentioned. A lot of the materials that you might read about the personalities of the period, of the Napoleonic period, are not in English, whereas the American Civil War, chances are they are, right? So we have a tremendous leg up because we have relatively recent history, and most of the documentation is in English. Even if you go back to the original English, it's not like you're reading Middle English or something like that. It's just slightly old-timey modern English. So you don't really have to worry about being able to read those things. We have Drew Detterer. Welcome back to the stream. We played back in the day. Oh boy, I gotta mention this too. So back in the day, we played War in Europe with glue tack on a wall, and it absolutely stained everything that it touched. And it absolutely didn't stick very well, and counters ended up in the carpet. And hilariously, so whenever you're moving and you have war games, you're always afraid that you're going to dump something and you're going to end up with counters everywhere, and you're going to have to clean them up and maybe miss stuff for, you lose counters, and you don't want that to happen. 400 games. The one game that got dumped was War in Europe. So it's like, fuck, seriously. So that was a thing that happened. Now, it did get dumped inside a box, so I think I got everything. It was somewhat contained. It was still a big pain in the nuts. So, you could also try the magnetics thing. I don't think the magnetic thing is normally practical, because most war game counters nowadays are not, in fact, single-sided. So what that means is you've got to use some kind of magnetic clip to hold the counters to the magnetized board. Okay, magnetizing the board, you just put a piece of sheet metal on the wall and Bob's your uncle. That's it. That works great. It's magnetizing the counters that's the problem. So the Bruce Harper, the guy behind GMT's A World at War, is a big advocate of magnetizing your stuff. And on the A World at War YouTube channel, there's a video about how to magnetize it. And he basically uses that adhesive magnetic tape to do it. That's completely viable, but it only works because they're single-sided counters. If they were double-sided counters, it would not work anymore. So because they're permanently affixed to the back of the counter, right? Unless you buy two sets of counters, I guess, and magnetize. But no, nobody's going to do that. Nobody's going to do that. So now I certainly agree that American Civil War is fascinating history. So I'm not trying to argue that. But it's fascinating history that's easier for us to get into than other periods as well. And that's a factor why we Americans, not just us Americans, right? The Canadians often feel like they get into Civil War. So Gilbert Collins, a great example of one of the great authorities on YouTube wargaming channels on the American Civil War, and he's Canadian. So half of what I learned about the American Civil War and wargaming, I learned from Gilbert Collins. So yeah, I'm afraid the War in Europe counters are in a big Ziploc bag. So now the game was like half sorted, and this is why it got messed up, because I forgot that all the counters weren't in the box. Some of the counters are sorted and they're in the box, but not all of them. So Dirk plexiglass glued together finned heat sinks for computer chips and use them as trays that multiple counters could sit in. This sounds. Let me show this comment. This sounds insanely impractical. I mean, it sounds, and from an engineering standpoint, it sounds like it's something you could do, but it sounds very impractical. Yeah, we're going to be ditching that after the show's over. I'm really only sipping at it just to, when my throat starts to get a little rough. Whew. This is a great question. I don't get asked this very often. I am not an advocate of laminating war game maps. There are people that disagree with me on this. There are people that one of our Wednesday group is a big fan of laminating maps. I am not. I'm a fan of putting plexi on them, and then when you're done with them, they go back in the box. I think that's a better solution because you put everything back in the box there. But then again, then you will occasionally find a game in which it is no longer possible to fit everything in the box. A World at War, World in Flames, Atlantic Wall, a number of the things we have mentioned this evening qualify in that sense. So, and in fact, for most of the Europa games don't fit in the boxes. You can maybe get your Balkan front counters in baggies in that box, but even that's kind of tight, to be honest. It's not that small of a game. So now there's something to be said for storing your maps flat, though. The trouble with that is that unless you have a pretty small collection of war games, and if you do, then what you do is you get one of those big artists' portfolios. You'll spend 50 or 75 bucks or something like that, and you just keep your maps flat between two pieces of cardboard in there. And there you go. But if you have a lot of games, then you end up with something like a map cabinet, and that's a giant investment in both footprint and in money. I mean, our buddy got old map cabinet from Ohio State. Actually, they were throwing away some office furniture, and he managed to do that. Mo from Mo's Game Table, who has just moved into a smaller place. Apparently, we moved into a much bigger place, but we were previously in a place that was really, really, really small. So everybody is more comfortable here. Page protectors for players' aids. Now, I don't mind laminating player aids. I prefer not to laminate the originals, though. I'll print them off myself and laminate the copies. That's fine. And I have a laminator. So I'm not anti-lamination in all circumstances. I just don't like to laminate the maps. Now, if you can get used map cabinets, then that's frankly the way to go. If you have to buy one new, you'll pay through the nose. So if you want to store your maps flat, and that I can see, because the seams, right, are where the seams and the corners are where the maps are going to wear the most. So, flattening out the seams and never folding them again is a way to make your maps last longer. Then again, if protection is your concern, then by all means, laminate them. I mean, so I tend to, I'll drop plexi, but I will store the maps in the box so they're folded again. But I will also tape the plexi down with the blue painter's tape. So it's that way nothing's going to move around. Now, if you have a larger arrangement where you have multiple tables, then it is advisable to come up with some kind of underlay to lay directly under the map, like a large board. I've seen that foam core insulation, or not foam core, but that foam insulation board used. Whatever you can get that's cheap in the size that you need it. And of course, it's relatively difficult to get sizes that are larger than 4 by 8 feet. ID Jester, welcome back to the stream. What? I don't have Herman coming on tomorrow. I don't know which. Oh, unless Dan has arranged that, which is possible. The show's on Dan's channel. I'll be happy to talk to Herman. So it figures that you would know that, but I wouldn't. This is how well the communication works. I don't know that I've ever seen lamination on only one side of a map. I would agree. The whole point is to protect the thing. You definitely want to get both sides. I do like the neoprene mats. I like them enough that I even bought one that has a big Ardwolf's Lair logo on it. So, and that's the thing that you're seeing when I do unboxing videos. We're not quite sure how that's going to work, but I don't have to make that decision right now because I have cork poster board backing thing. I don't know what this means. Somebody clarify. So Strelnikov, welcome back. Thanks very much. We're still settling in. We're frankly going to be still settling in for months. But things are going smoothly. We got a dining room table yesterday. We found a used one that we liked on Craigslist. So was not it's in nice shape. Let me put it there. It's not in nice shape, but it's a good dining room table for us because it matches the decor in the rest of the house. We do have to give it a refinish and thorough cleaning. So I'll eventually, like I said, do a video on this. I've got about 10 sheets of plexi. So I've got an enormous quantity of plexi. I've got some like map and a half length plexi. I've got some anti-glare plexi. I've got Mike Anthony. Thank you so much. Much appreciated the support. Cost of printers. So one of the things you'll have to ask is convenience, because you can go up to Staples and do this. That's not going to be your cheapest option. I would look at Vistaprint. I don't know that Vistaprint will be cheaper, but Vistaprint will do something that your local Staples will not, which is print on vinyl. That's very interesting. I think it's at like 60 DPI or something like that. The DPI is relatively low. But if I was looking for an online source for something like that, I would probably first investigate Vistaprint. I've dealt with them before. Their quality is pretty good. As long as you know what you're doing, the quality is pretty good. I actually almost placed an order through Vistaprint today for a stamp games that say stolen from the library of Ardwolf's Lair, and I decided not to do that. I ordered the new Skirmisher instead. So I mean, there's also people that you can keep laminated maps rolled too, but then you're going to have problems making them flat again when it's time to play on them, unless you then go put plexi on top of them. I will say, Kilroy of Kilroy was here. I probably beaten you on plexi. I don't know about games. Like I said, I've got just under 400 games by my reckoning. So I do like the canvas map. I think I have a canvas map for the vote. And it is nice. I'm not sure it's canvas. It's like a coated canvas, I guess. So John Nolan says UPS print is good. So that's something I wouldn't necessarily have expected. FedEx will probably do that stuff too now because they bought Kinko's. My plexi is tucked into the side between the bookcase and the wall. Now these ones are going to have to move because there's another bookcase going in there. But I was quite shocked, by the way, that Vistaprint's charge, at least based on what I was told, charges for printing full-size maps on vinyl is as cheap as it was. Whew. So I'd be concerned about this. I got to tell you, because just breakage, right? That's a serious hazard, right? If you drop something on one of those or drop one of those, and they're super heavy. I am generally happy to buy plexi and a bottle of Windex, and we're good to go, and a roll of blue painter's tape to secure the corners. Yeah, so I mean, I think printing anything like that is going to probably be fairly expensive, but it'll also be a lot cheaper than that big board gaming guy that does the oversized maps. It'll definitely be cheaper than that. But then again, how do you do the counters, right? Are you going to do oversized counters or not bother? I don't know. I've got more than enough plexi to cover my 3 tables that I have set up to game on. Mongoose Traveler 2300. So there is an old Mongoose Traveler 2300 which used the old Mongoose Traveler first edition rules, and a new Mongoose Traveler 2300 which is a box set which just came out in the last couple of months, and which is both of which use the respective Mongoose Traveler rules. So first and second edition. There are a decent number of changes between Mongoose first and Mongoose second, but most of those changes are in the most of the most impactful of those changes are in the structure of character creation and not really in the mechanics. Drew Detterer is singing the praises of the oversized map, and I am forced to agree. It is really nice to have oversized hexes. In some cases, that's not practical, but where it is, it's very nice. My ice is doing very well. So I suspect that, especially if you're going to do oversized maps, that the Vassal art assets will be of insufficient resolution for what you're doing. However, I have also looted the Vassal module for art assets for counters to do things like setup cards and stuff like that. And those have tended to look fairly good. I did some for Beyond the Rhine that I didn't finish them, so that's why they never materialized on BGG. But those, we are having some squareness problems with these Clash of Arms counters, by the way. So if I seem to be hammering a little bit and rotating a lot more per counter, that is why. So, but yeah, I've totally liberated counter art from Vassal modules to do setup cards and stuff. So pretty much OCS and Goss on that. Other games, I'm a little less concerned about it. I mean, nobody wants to buy their own large format printer, right? So these are 1/2-inch counters. I'm back to the 1/2-inch clipper here. So this, I just forbid this, to be honest. If you got a bottle of water or something like that, no problem, keep it on the floor. Make sure you're fastening the lid tightly. Now, from many years of chewing tobacco, I was very much in the habit of always fastening the lids on any kind of bottle that I had nearby. So, because trust me, you do not want to spill that shit on your game. As somebody who has done it, spilled tobacco juice on the game, you do not wish to do that. Also, don't spill Angostura bitters on your granite countertop. Note to self. So, Brant, thanks very much. Cookie Sheet War Games. Oh, you're saying there is a Cookie Sheet War Games geek list that is basically very small footprint war games? Because that's cool if there is. Now, I was going to say, play Library of Napoleonic Battles. There's tons of half map and quarter map games, battles in that system, particularly in the Peninsula War Games, but also in the new one, Bonaparte and the Quadrilateral. That's got a bunch. I think only one of the battles in that set is a full map game. The rest of them are all half map or quarter map games. So that's a thing you do once, right? And you don't do it again. Ugh. Now, so on the one hand, I am like super OCD about my shit. All right. So I don't want coffee stains. I don't want rings. I don't want people with their greasy fingers that just ate the pizza touching my counters. I'm very fastidious about all that. But on the other hand, we're supposed to play these games, right? They're not priceless artifacts. They're not the Mona Lisa. They're intended to be played. And so wear and tear that results from play, I feel like I don't really have a leg to stand on complaining about it. Abraxas MF. I forgot to do the social media post. Damn it. Yeah, let's get at least one out. So, World War II operational system with a huge variety of small map battles like Library of Napoleonic Battles. Oh, okay. I think small map battles is a problem. However, one that I will highly recommend is these. Roads to Leningrad, Roads to Moscow. Now, they're not small map games. They're one map games, right? They're both one map games. And unfortunately, both games are out of print. GMT dropped the reprint of Roads to Leningrad off their system. I'll mention EFS in a minute here. So they are highly playable in like a long sitting, right? Or you can, some of the longer scenarios. Each game has, I believe, 4 scenarios. There's like a short scenario and a long scenario, and then there's 2 maps. So you have a short scenario and a long scenario on each map. They're excellent games. Highly recommended. I don't know why they're not more popular. They play wonderfully. I really wanted the new version of Roads to Leningrad, which even though I have the original one, I still ordered the new. I was still in for the new one, and I would have happily let that go through, except that we didn't get that. So Stegler mentions the old Army Group Center or Army Group South quads from SPI, and I'm not such a huge fan of that. Now, the EFS has every one of the East Front system games or East Front series games has a decent selection of small map scenarios. I think that's true going all the way back to Typhoon, which is the first game, sounded like the progenitor of the series, as it were. But you're not, in many cases, at least in some cases, you're not using all the rules. They're really intended as learning scenarios. I think EFS is worth your time, but I think if you want to limit yourself for space, then your best bet is Crimea, because it's the one map game, and you can get there's some pretty interesting stuff happening in the Crimea. If otherwise you're looking at a larger boxed game that might have 8 scenarios in it, 3 of which you can play that are, either small map or mini map or one map games. So worth your time, but I'm not sure it's an answer to the question here. This is a great question. And this is a question I'd want to ask of an actual designer and not myself. I have noodled with a couple of things that, Ancients is tough because you are reliant on a very narrow range of sources, okay? So let's say you want to do a game about Zama, all right? You're basically, everybody else is drawing from one of the 2 ancient sources that talks about Zama. Those sources are Herodotus, who was contemporary with Zama, more or less, and Livy, who was 100 or 200 years after the battle. So Herodotus is considered the more reliable source in that context. But everybody else's information, everybody else that has written, Liddell Hart writes about Zama, he's pulling his numbers from Livy, right, as opposed to Herodotus, because Herodotus's numbers don't support the thesis that Livy is trying to give you in the book, which is a somewhat fatuous thing that Scipio was a greater military genius than Napoleon was. Brant, thanks for stopping by. Okay, so Jeff, let's talk about this, because this is a thing that is going to come up. So I was talking to a buddy of mine who came up with a very similar solution to my interim cat proofing solution. The cat proofing solution is shut the door. Have it in a room that you can shut the cats out of. Mission accomplished. There you go. The other option is you could have one of those fancy tables that you could put the lid on. You could do that. Those are expensive. You can make them. There's the YouTube tutorials on how to make them. Polybius, not Herodotus. Not saying you're wrong. But that doesn't sound right to me, Jeff Anderson. But I could be wrong. It's been a while since I've looked at that. So, or it could be that Polybius also talks about Zama, but it pulls his numbers from Herodotus. That's a possibility. So, yep, as Stigler points out, you can also just do it on Basil. But let's assume we're talking about physical games. So, A, shut the door. B, get one of those fancy tables that with a lid. C, don't get a fancy table with a lid. Instead, get a sheet of something. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be like MDF. It could be more plexi, whatever. When you're done for the day, put some blocky, uniformly sized objects scattered around the map, including at the four corners, and set your sheet of whatever on top of that. And as long as it's not too close to the counters aren't too close to the edge, you should be able to keep cats out of that. I don't know that that's a perfect solution. I certainly want a door, but I think it is a halfway decent solution that I am looking at. Ooh. No, it looks okay. Looks okay. I thought we had a bad clip there for the first time in a long time. Like I said, some of these Clash of Arms counters are a little less than perfectly square. And that's resulting in a little extra drag when I clip in some cases. Some dogs will get super excitable and jostle the table too. Don't ask me, man. This is bad gun discipline right here. Is if you need a loaded pistol on top of your dresser where the cat's going to get at it. You can't put it in the drawer, really. So, yes, this is basically exactly what I'm talking about. You don't need to use wooden blocks, though. You don't have to overcomplicate it that much. You can just use dice. I mean, Jesus, I've got enough dice to do this with. Maybe you want a little more height because you're playing Europa, for example, and you need like to accommodate the 2-inch stacks that you have. Maybe you get some pipe nipples or something like that. Black malleable pipe nipples are $1 or $2 a piece. Last I checked, you could do that. There's all kinds of objects that you could use. That would be nice because it's heavy. And the extra weight might give it additional stability. I'd put something on top of it too to make sure that a cat doesn't jump on it and then scoot the whole thing right off the table. That would be a situation that I would find highly, highly, highly undesirable. Yeah, this is my concern with that method, actually. And this is why I want a door. This is why I'm looking at one map things that I could set up right now, starting with this, which I am about to clip the final counter. So I'm always I won't have wipes at the ready. I'll tell somebody, go wash your fucking hands. I got no problem telling people to do that. Before you handle my pieces, go wash your hands if you just ate some pizza. I would do that for him. Anyway, we're finished clipping 6 Days of Glory. I got a fair number of one counter sheet games that I feel like maybe I should get caught up on. And generally speaking, in the course of one counter clipping show, I can get one counter sheet clipped without too much trouble. This wasn't the fastest clip ever, but it definitely wasn't the slowest clip ever either. So I've done two full counter sheets in a counter clipping stream before. That's unusual, but I've done it. No, this was about an hour and a half of clipping. It's not bad at all. This has also, by the way, a Rick Barber map. I did a video on this game if you want to go check it out. So this has a very interesting and sort of very pink color palette, but it's a Rick Barber map that I do think looks nice. It's an interesting looking game. I wanted to try the Days series. There are 4 games in that series, of which I have 2. We'll be trying a different cocktail next time. Perhaps it will be a gin and tonic. which is kind of an idiot proof. As long as you have lime to put in it, is a completely idiot proof cocktail. So our cats will not do this, but they will drink out of it. So I would prefer, that's not desirable. So yes, exactly. With the fabric. This is exactly. Yeah, I'll just tell you, go wash your hands before you handle these pieces again. I got no problem with that. Show respect for other people's games and stuff. Clay, welcome to the back to the stream. It's been quite a while. Clay's been doing some very interesting video content over at his place. Ugh. Gross. You should be seeing it crawl, but I didn't update it, so we're not seeing it crawl this time. And it was like, with the move and everything, I wasn't sure if how much content was going to be here until literally today. For the part of the reason for the crawl is to say, hey, there's a Traveler Tuesday video on Tuesday. And if I don't know if that's going to happen, then I couldn't update it till like literally a couple hours ago. So, but we do in fact have a Traveler Tuesday video scheduled for Tuesday, and plus we're on the show with Dan tomorrow, who's apparently he's got Herman lined up, which is great. And we have the unboxing video, which is Donnerschlag from VUCA Simulations, which they fine folks at VUCA were kind enough to send me. And I got to tell you, it's nice. It's very nice. A bunch of people, apparently, I was, not exactly. I was like, oh, that's awesome that they reached out to me. Now, a bunch of people got stuff from VUCA recently. But it's cool, and it looks really nice. And the other one I got from them is Crossing the Line Aachen 1944, which actually looks even better. But I have looked at that less. It's substantially more involved than Donnerschlag. So Donnerschlag looks interesting. It's one of the it's the breakout attempt or the break-in attempt to break in to relieve this German Sixth Army trapped in Stalingrad, which of course failed. And it's pretty interesting looking. So, and it's component wise, it looks fantastic. It's just fantastic. Very good, Jeff Beeler. Got the Mongoose Traveler GM screen. I actually got my Spinward Extents book delivered to the old place because I think their fulfillment people had it sitting on the dock for like 2 weeks and it didn't go to the new address. So I'm now placing orders that are coming to the new address. What did I order? I ordered the new Skirmisher for Multi-Man, and I bought something on eBay. It is something I've had my eye on for quite a while on eBay, and it wasn't cheap, but it was, and I'll do a video. But it wasn't a bananas expensive, second front thing either. Definitely not. This game looks really interesting, actually. So this is basically the first couple of months, I believe, of the West Front of 1914. This looks very interesting. It's very big. It does not have mounted maps, like all the other stuff that VUCA's doing. This looks very intriguing. I'm intrigued by that Bismarck game and the Great Crisis of Frederick II. So they have a bunch of interesting games. The ones that were of interest to me were the Hex Encounter ones. So Donnerschlag and Crossing the Line. I want to say I keep wanting to say Crossing the Rhine, which is not the title. So be very interested. It's an interesting they're an interesting company because they're in Germany, which has not traditionally been a place where you could get Hex Encounter war games, right? So Avalon Hill debatably Avalon Hill's 1914 was done right in that it's a hideously boring slog. But on the other hand, in that those first couple of months, you do have quite a lot of movement, right? You have the Race to the Sea and all that. And Mons, there's a lot of maneuvering happening in those first 3 months. I feel like there are 2 games covering that I would recommend to people. Unfortunately, neither of which I've played, so it's a very lukewarm recommendation. One of which is Offensiva Outrance, which looks like it's got a lot of promise, but I haven't played it. It's quite involved. It's the first 3 months of the 1914 campaign. Much lighter and much easier to recommend because I've played the system, even if I haven't played the game, is Drive on Paris from Multiman or the Gamers. I think the Gamers, which is an SCS game on that campaign. And that actually looks really pretty good. I shouldn't have gotten rid of it, to be honest. So I think I've updated all the gaming stuff, but you got, when you move, you got to update. You got to update the bank so your billing addresses are correct. You got to update all the gaming companies. So I've updated Compass, MMP, GMT. I don't think I've done Legion. We got to do them. I've updated eBay, PayPal. Those are important because you buy a lot of stuff there. I got my CBD people. I haven't updated them yet because I cut the CBD off the orders because I didn't want it shipped when I was in the middle of moving. So I got to put that back in now, and that's got to go to the new address. So all that stuff has to happen. So there's from what I understand, there is a decent amount of differences between Twilight in the East and 1914 Offensiva Outrance. There's a decent evolution of the game system there, and certainly Mike Resch feels that it's an improvement. I don't know if he's right. I don't know if he's wrong. I do know that Twilight in the East goes for a bunch of money, and Offensiva Outrance not so much. But it's it's also more recent, so there's that. This is a great game, actually. Is that visible in the shot? Apparently not. That is right here. I have a playthrough video of When Eagles Fight, which is the East Front game. Glory's End is of the two games. It's a two-pack, right? You get 1914 Glory's End, which is the first 3 months of the West Front, and then you get When Eagles Fight, which is the entire East Front. I do think the East Front game is a better game. Mr. Brings Light, thank you very much for subscribing. Thank you. I do feel like When Eagles Fight is a better game. Part of that is just like a piece handling thing because you have a unit replace. A lot of the units have 4 steps in Glory's End, and therefore they have 2 counters. So you might have to replace counters more often. That's a bit of a hassle. It's not as bad as maybe it sounds, but it's a good game. They're both very good games. They are both. Fields of Despair is good too, to be honest about it. I played that at an Origins a few years ago. At this point, it's probably like 8 years ago. But it's a surprisingly robust and deep game. I was surprised by it. Yeah, maybe. But if you want that, then look at Der Weltkrieg, which gives you the Der Weltkrieg Eastern Front, which gives you the entire war on the Eastern Front. So, and in fact, the entire war on all the fronts. But I haven't really looked at this yet. That Fire on the Mountain is the latest thing from Legion, and that is South Mountain. I think it's South Mountain. That's an interesting looking game. Clash of Giants. So I was actually really intrigued by Clash of Giants, Clash of Giants 2, and Clash of Giants Civil War are 3 Ted Racer games. I was actually super intrigued by Clash of Giants when I kind of got back into wargaming, and I was kind of real big on World War I at the time. And those still look pretty good. But then Clash of Giants Civil War came out, and I saw some video on it, and I was like, I don't think this is quite for me. So therefore, my interest in the original 2 World War I Clash of Giants cooled off considerably. That may or may not have been justified, just so we're clear. But I did end up feeling like maybe those weren't a good match for me. But, happy to be wrong, too, on something like that. Roger, first of all, welcome back to the stream. Thanks for stopping by, and thanks for commenting. So this may just be a visibility thing because there's so much more World War II content than any other topic that there's just more traffic on it. That could be what this is. So I picked this up. In fact, it ought to be here somewhere. And in fact, we may be clipping this pretty soon too. So I did a video interview with Jeff Phipps, the designer of this, and this is a very interesting looking system. The new game in the series, Mons 1914, the Mad Minute, which is the first big battle between the Germans and the British in 1914. Sounds very interesting. And GMT dropped it. It just wasn't moving fast enough. There's been a substantial streamlining of the system. New core rule book is available on BGG, on the Gallipoli BGG page. Happy to report. I don't know if I've mentioned this in the stream or not. I think I have. But GMT dropped it. Like I said, it just wasn't moving fast enough on their P500. It was picked up like that by Compass. Bill loves World War I games, and I don't know that I instigated the connection there, but I said to Jeff, go check with Compass, and he's like, oh yeah, we'll do that. So I think he was probably doing that already, but I'm happy to say Compass has picked it up in a very fast pickup. So we will be seeing Mons 1914, the Mad Minute from Compass at some point, and that's fantastic. That's just fantastic. Lamps are going out. This is a World War I. Well, yes. So yes, but good news. It'll be coming out anyway. So the Lamps are going out is the game John's talking about here, and it is a game that got a lot of positive press. I actually have the second edition. It's very nice, but I haven't played it. So at some point, I would like to play it. Late World War I West Front, Operation Michael. There's that 1918 Storm in the West, which is another Ted Racer Command Magazine design. That looks pretty good. This is a good point. Stonewall Sword is Cedar Mountain. This is the Blind Sword system, which is excellent. Highly recommended by me. Beautiful Rick Barber maps. I'm a little, I don't know that upset is the right word, but it is going to be, I'm going to be saddened that future games in that series will not benefit from Rick Barber maps. And I'll be also upset should there not be further games in that series, but I'm pretty sure there's going to be further games in that series. It's a fine system. It's, if you want just something, GBACW is just too much. Look at Blind Swords. Blind Swords is a great middle ground between something extremely simple, like the Worthington Games Civil War Brigade Battle Series, which is also pretty good, although I didn't like the Antietam game, but I did like the Shiloh game. Fango Wolf says Black Swan is even better than Blind Sword. So this is a bit of confusing branding-wise. Black Swan is the version of Blind Swords. I don't know that Herman would necessarily agree with the nomenclature I'm applying here, but Blind Swords is Black Swan is a system based on Blind Swords that is used in A Most Fearful Sacrifice, and it looks really good. That also has a gorgeous Rick Barber map, by the way, which is, in my opinion, one of the really best Rick Barber maps. It's really nice. It really is. I got to figure out where that's at. So the great thing, how much is a postcard to Canada? It's like 75 cents, something like that. I mean, we got to be honest about GBACW here. It's a quite crunchy system. A lot of the line of sight rule is pretty complicated and fiddly. As just one example, the interactions of some of the order types are fairly fussy. GBACW, I think, is the go-to. It's kind of the Labatai. Oh boy, it's the Russians. I've angered Mr. Putin again. It's a crunchy system, and a crunchy system is not going to be suitable for everybody. It is, in some sense, the Labatai of the American Civil War. It's the most detailed system. I think Line of Battle, which is a system I also like, by the way, but is a little less detailed. But you're also kind of encouraged to kind of wave your hand at the line of sight rules, right? Musket and Pike is simpler than GBACW. Just having looked at Musket and Pike, it is simpler than GBACW. In a lot of ways, a lot of these games, Great Battles of the American Civil War, Musket and Pike, Triumph and Glory, Jour de Gloire, even GBOH, all kind of come from that root of Terrible Swift Sword, right? There's you can see the influence coming from that game down to the Musket and Pike dual pack that some people who were lucky enough to have the money at the time just got. So yeah, I don't know if so if we're talking about the GMT 1 to 9 scale, I'd say GBACW is a 7, but it's a firm 7, right? And I'd say Musket and Pike to me is about a 6. Sounds about right. I don't know if it's the best game ever, but it's one of the best titles ever. I think that's indisputable. It's a great title. Incidentally, one of the Bruce Catton, Grant Takes Command and Grant Moves South were both available for like an omnibus was available for like $2.99. So I picked that up, even though I think I have them both in paperback. I would at this time prefer to play Three Dog as well. Now, there's a caveat there, though, that in the case of something like part of the reason of that is because it's a project to play either game. And if I'm going to undertake the project, I'd rather make a project out of Three Dog and have the advantage of the chit pull system and all that stuff. On the other hand, I would be perfectly happy to play something like P Ridge, which I have in the old SPI game, and which Stigler, I hope somebody's working on P Ridge. The Gettysburg of the West, as it's sometimes called, but or Cedar Mountain, right? I pretty much picked up Cedar Mountain based on the idea that I was going to play both the new and the old Cedar Mountain and see how the systems compared, which would be great content, but high effort content too. So yes, I do hope that they do more Musket and Pike games, and I don't know that they won't, but I know that Ben Hull has moved on to a related system that is, I forget what the game is called, but it's a related system. I don't believe they're available. Those games are available anymore at the pre-order price, and because I missed the pre-order price, I have two options here. I can either wait, I can order them now, which would cost me about $200+ to order all 3 items that I missed. This is Great Battles of Julius Caesar Deluxe, the Musket and Pike Dual Pack, and the Stalingrad 42 expansion. Or I could wait for the sale, and I think I'm going to wait for the sale. John, you are not fully grasping the content of that box. So there's kind of two. So the Great Battles of Julius Caesar Deluxe is 2 box games plus, I believe, 3 expansions. The boxes, so one of the boxes is Caesar Conquest of Gaul, which is indeed Caesar against Gauls and Britons and assorted other barbarous peoples, right? So they are less organized than the Romans, and you might be forgiven for assuming that those battles are mostly cakewalks, and they are. However, the original Great Battles of Julius Caesar is the Civil Wars, where it's Romans against other Romans. So, Caesar versus Pompey, for example. And that's not just the Romans curb stomping Gauls up in Gaul, right? So there are people who don't like that set because of that, because they think it's boring because it's Romans versus other Romans. But on the other hand, you've got relatively evenly matched battles on that. So Shagler says we might have a Western Theater GBACW project early in gestation. So we've just gotten Shiloh. So hopefully we'll be getting, and I got to bust that out to the table too. I'll point out. So Shiloh would be cool. Chickamauga would be cool. P Ridge would be cool. Of course, River of Death covers Chickamauga, and I think we're not getting that as it is. I agree with this. You kind of want, so if you have SPQR Deluxe, you get at least a couple of those. You get one of the battles in the Jugurthine War with Jugurtha, and I think Sulla's down there at the time. But the actual decisive action of that war is not a battle. It's Sulla's ability at treachery. So, who publishes a really decent treatment of South Mountain? So the two that spring to mind are Twin Peaks, which is right by my face, which is South Mountain and Cedar Mountain. There is also a South Mountain game from the Gamers in the Regimental sub-series of the Civil War Brigade series. Boy, talk about confusing branding that is. Now, back to line of battle. Murfreesboro is also handled in Dead of Winter. That's Stones River. Stones River to the Union, Murfreesboro to the Confederates. I've got Antony and Cleopatra. That actually looks really good, and I really want to play that. Vicksburg is tougher. Okay, let's talk about Vicksburg. So there is this highlights one of the big differences between great battles of the American Civil War and great campaigns of the American Civil War. The Siege of Vicksburg is exactly that, a siege, right? If you played that out in GBACW, it has every chance of boring you to actual death. On the other hand, there's a lot of maneuvering around the siege in something like, potentially at least, in great campaigns of the American Civil War. And in fact, one of the projects in the pipeline for GCACW is Vicksburg. Apparently there were some problems with mapping that area. They have apparently resolved those questions. I'm very much looking forward to that. Perryville would be another good one. Richmond would be in the Eastern Theater, however. These were talking about Richmond, Virginia, right? I guess so. So usually Caesar GMT has. I mean, I'm waiting for the sale at this point too. Usually they have a sale. So, this is another one that's coming up, and I think we asked Mark about this when we had him on the show with Dan, and I don't know that it's quite that close, but this looks real promising. So my understanding is, so I have both of the magazines, okay, both of the C3Is that contain Mark's Game Gettysburg, which I fooled around with and bounced off of relatively hard. And I think the reason I think is just a scale preference. I think there's not enough there. There's not enough pieces to make it interesting. To a chess player like Mark, I think he could get that level of enjoyment out of the 15 pieces that are on that map. On the other hand, the very next issue had the Waterloo game, which is on a map twice, 2 or 3 times, maybe 2 to 4 times as big. Which is much more of an operational game using essentially the same system. And that game, I think, is actually very good. My understanding, based on I feel free to correct me on this, I hope I'm right, is that the scale of the Rebel Fury battles are more like Waterloo than they are Gettysburg. So I hope that is the case. I will order GCACW Vicksburg just like that. In fact, I did place a pre-order for GCACW on to Richmond 2 today. So that has been ordered. MMP sales usually around Halloween, I think. Eric and Smolensk, probably not, is my guess. Hey, I could be wrong, But generally, the shit that's selling really well doesn't go on sale from MMP. GMT just puts everything on sale unless it's brand new. So this is a great idea. If you're in California, you can afford to do that. Cool. Yeah, so the takeaway there is Vicksburg is a better fit for GC ACW. Same with Petersburg, by the way, than it is for GB ACW, which is a battle game. GC ACW is an operational game. Yeah, but see the relatively low counter density, which is only a little bit higher. It's not density really; it's just the number of pieces. Is a little bit higher in the Waterloo game, but you have a lot of room to maneuver. In the Gettysburg game, you're on this like 11 by 17 map, and you all just kind of pile in. And it's one counter per hex. That didn't work for me. But the Waterloo game, I thought, again, basically the same system, I thought was pretty interesting. What Civil War battle has the least number of war games on it that deserves a war game? Oh, good question. I don't know that I don't consider myself educated enough to know this. Red River, maybe. That's really I think that's more interesting at the campaign level than it is at the battle level. That's interesting. The Perryville is another interesting one. The battles of the seven, the Peninsula campaign, most of those have not gotten games on them. So there's those. That's what springs to mind immediately. I would be happy to have more Chickamauga games, though. So the Byzantines would disagree with Perfidious Albion on this point. Yeah, this is approximately. This runs for a couple of days, as I recall. This usually runs like over a weekend. So this sounds about right. But sometimes it's not on Black Friday. Sometimes it's just like, hey, we decided, screw it, let's do it early. So I don't unless. So I'm in the relatively lucky position of having gone to Winter Offensive a couple of years ago and basically bought out the entire backlog of MMP products that I was interested in, right? So I don't. There's really nothing that I need at this point, unless they put like Manila on sale, which I wouldn't expect. Maybe I'd order. No Question of Surrender. I keep thinking about that, for example. That's a possibility. But I mean, I don't know that I need anything from MMP that's not like a new upcoming release. I got to get the Utah Beach thing ordered as well, for that matter. So, Infernal Machine looks so. They put that on P500, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'm not super into that. And then I started reading about it, and I'm like, this actually sounds kind of cool, to be honest about it. But I mean, that's true of a lot of the games at GMT. Cross Bronx Expressway sounds fascinating. It's not really a game about this particular highway. It's a generally interesting looking game about urban development. That looks very interesting. Civil War Brigade series did cover the battles of the 7 days. That is absolutely true. But in many cases, those are games. They're the only games on those subjects, right? Malvern Hill. Somebody else is doing a Malvern Hill game now, but there's very few games on those battles. Or Champion Hill, for that matter. There is a GBACW entry on Red River. It was released either by TSR or by 3W back in the magazine back in the day. There's also Fredericksburg, okay? And Fredericksburg is generally considered a shitty battle to play a game about. However, because nobody's going to do what Burnside did unless you're forced to do it by the game, in which case, why play the game? Just read the book. There is, I think, a lot of potential, and this is why I really wanted the Burnside Takes Command module from Skirmisher number 2. there's a lot of potential in Fredericksburg as a campaign. There's at least one game. I'm going to finish this thing at this point, but god damn, it's terrible. I believe there is at least one game on Cold Harbor from Against the Odds. So, is there a good Chancellorsville game? Yes, it is called Stonewall's Last Battle. It is the Chancellorsville campaign, but it's operational. It's not a battle game. So, I mean, that's where I'm going to point you. And you can get a copy of Stonewall's Last Battle for roughly $50 on the secondary market. Even on eBay, where the prices tend to be relatively inflated, I got a shrink-wrapped copy for like $50, plus or minus $10. The game you're thinking of is Not War But Murder. It's a great title, by the way. Carl Creeder from the War Game Boot Camp, thank you so much. Very much appreciated. Dinner time, I can understand that. I'm probably going to make some ramen noodles after this. So, which means more ramen noodles. So my family chipped in when we bought the house and got me a Blackstone, which is like an outdoor flat top gas powered grill. And I've used it about 7 or 8 times at this point. And I mean, the only things I really know how to do on it are stir fries and smash burgers. But I've gotten some very good stir fries and smash. I mean, the smash burgers have been fantastic too. So, one might also argue that Rome never left and became what we think of as Western European civilization. I think the papal. I would not make this case. Let me put it that way. So yeah, these the Enemy Coast Ahead games. GMT, please do more. Jerry White, please do more of those. Those are very interesting. The rumor mill says that the next one in that series is going to be Pearl Harbor, which I would be very interested in seeing. Be very interested in getting an insight into the Japanese planning of Pearl Harbor, which is a topic that I don't believe has ever really been explored in war games before. So, smash burgers are just thin hamburgers. I mean, that's all it is. It's just a particular way to do it that requires you to have a blazing hot grill. So this game is not part of the Civil War Brigade battle series, even though if you look at like the boxes and the branding and the titles and all that, it kind of looks like it is, but it's not. I don't have any information on this one. The Civil War Brigade battle series, and they did a Kickstarter not long ago for the 7 days battles. And that actually looks neat. I think that's a good system for that. It's a very light system, right? If Blind Swords is too much for you, look at the Civil War Brigade battle system. The only flaw of which is there's only 2 games out right now, Shiloh and Antietam. And I didn't like Antietam. I thought Antietam was scripted is not quite the right word, but it's basically you have to fight over these hexes. And the reason why you have to fight over these hexes is those are the hexes they historically fought over. And I don't like that. That reads like scripting. So, so Legion does have a Pearl Harbor game coming, and as I recall, it's been coming for ages. These are, in fact, the IKEA Kallax shelves. They are not too much trouble to put together, and they are very sturdy if you do as instructed and mount them to the wall. If you don't mount them to the wall, so these aren't mounted to the wall. So but the ones in the office are, and that's because they are in their permanent home. These are not yet in their permanent home, and in fact, I'm going to have to put some 2x4 stripping across the wall here to get that done. So eventually, these will end up in permanently locked in place too. But war games aren't that heavy. If I'm putting books on them or RPGs, which are pretty much books, then I definitely want them to be mounted to the wall. Particularly the 4x4 that I took apart, broke while it was being taken apart, and put it back together, and it's holding together. But man, I wanted that thing tacked to the wall. So yeah, I'm very curious to see this too. Now, maybe it won't work, but I'm very curious to see that because I don't have really a lot of insight on the Japanese planning for Pearl Harbor. So there's something Iggy Crichtel is something about squirrels set your car on fire. I am confused. So they did have plenty of intelligence that pointed to a Japanese attack, but they didn't necessarily expect the audacity of an attack on Pearl Harbor. They more expected it on the Philippines, which also happened. But I was talking about this the other day, and I think there are essentially two. My feelings on Europa, and I think we'll close with this. My feelings on Europa are relatively nuanced. Okay, on the one hand, I have played 3 Europa games now and have had fun in all 3 of them. I enjoyed the experience. Furthermore, as a war gamer, I feel that experience contributed to my growth as a war gamer. I think it was over and above that the fact that I enjoyed it, it was valuable. However, the system is a big steaming pile of shit. The fundamental problem is that it is based in this 1973 system that for some reason, and I believe the reason, I mean, I'm guessing here, but I'm guessing that the reason is Frank Chadwick lost interest in it relatively soon. That they never really evolved. Instead, they just added more. And in adding more games, more battles, more stuff, you needed to add more rules to support that, to the point where you end up with this very bloated edifice in the latest version of the rules, which is in Wavell's War. There's a clear evolution visible as the rulebooks get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. If you look at Fire in the East, the rulebook's not that big. But that's the topic that the thing was originally intended to address. And it is a topic at which, at that scale, it works, right? And other caveat is that at the end, you get something where your results look historically plausible, right? We got, in every Europa experience, we got something that was historically plausible at the end. If you view the game system as an algorithm, the algorithm puts out reasonable results. The problem is it's bloated, right? To conduct a given ground combat, we were playing War in the Desert. We had turns in which we had 3 ground attacks. How many rolls of dice does it take to resolve those 3 ground attacks? Now you might think to yourself, maybe 3, it could be 3, could be 9, could be 6, could be 12. I don't know. No, it's more like 300. Because of the air system. The air system is an absolute abortion. You have hundreds of counters. We have to send in, 30 or 40 aircraft to each of these these engagements for support. You fly in your offensive air support, you fly in the defensive air support, you fly in any interceptions, you conduct all these air combats, each of which is an individual roll. Then any plane that survives on that, you roll flak. You roll flak against the offensive air support and the defensive air support. By that time, you're 100 rolls into the combat, and then you make one D6 roll on this relatively boring vanilla CRT to determine the combat results. And all you did was add more factors with the net result of all that air action. So the problem is a scale problem. There's too many units in the game, right? If you look at OCS versus Europa, you'll see games with virtually identical unit scales, right? They're both sort of division level games. There's a lot of subdivisional units or component subdivisions. You have roughly the same number of counters. But in OCS, the map scale is 5 miles per hex. And in Europa, it's 16 miles to the hex. So what you end up with is, stacks of 16 counters in Europa. You can have that in OCS, but it's A, very rare, and B, thoroughly disincentivized because you don't want that stack to get barraged. If I'm sure that there's 10 REs in a hex, I'm going to barrage it whether I've got a correct spotter on it or not, because I've got a pretty good chance at 4 columns up of doing step losses, right? So, anyway, as long as the car didn't catch on fire in the garage. Ken X, Ken 10, thank you very much for stopping by. Thank you everyone for stopping by. So, we can talk about this later. And I've talked about Europa before. So that's what I mean about scale, right? If it's a divisional level game, make it a divisional level game. Make it divisions, and maybe you got some smaller than division units. But that's not what you have. You have divisions, and then you have 5 or 6 times as many non-divisional units, plus hundreds of air counters. Many of, and it's at its worst in Second Front, right? Because it's Western, the Western Front of World War II. There's going to be an enormous quantity of Allied air. The German air is relatively easy to run, but by like late 1944, there ain't much left of the German Air Force at that point. Like I said, you get a good simulation, right, out of it. We saw, starting in 1943, we saw the gradual degradation of German air capabilities over the course of July 1943 to June 1944. Even there, the Luftwaffe is not what it was, right? And then, within a couple months after that, they're absolutely shredded and can do nothing but like little nickel dime stuff here and there. So, this is also true. This is also true. This is also true. Yes, indeed it is. Dugout Doug. There's a reason they called him Dugout Doug, because he was hiding in the dugout. So, and Polelu was basically done at MacArthur's instigation as well. And debatably, Polelu wasn't worth anybody's time or the considerable Allied casualties it took. Now, again, I've played Second Front twice. I then bought it for $400+. So clearly, there's an experience that you're getting out of Europa that is worthwhile in some way. But I mean, if you look at the mechanic in anything like the mechanics in anything like an objective way, then you're not going to end up with a favorable impression, right? You're going to be like, man, this is super primitive. It's super clumsy. It's super inelegant. We've got rules, special rule for the Cajun guys. We got special rule for this, special rule for that, special rule for everything. Yes, these are very good. If you want a Goss tutorial, Monster on My Table, YouTube channel, Monster on My Table is doing. They're not coming out super fast, but if you start now, you've got a number of them to go through. These are excellent and highly recommended by me. So, all right. So we are just about out of time. So I will remind everybody that we are online tomorrow on Dan's channel at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And sounds like we might have Herman Lutman on. That would be great. If not, then it'll just be me and Dan, and we'll talk about hookers and Coke. So there's that. Tomorrow also at 10 a.m. we have Traveler Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. We are looking at Journal of the Travelers Aid Society Volume 10 from Mongoose Publishing for their Mongoose Traveler 2nd edition. And on Thursday, we have the weekly unboxing video, which is Donnerschlag from VUCA Simulations. Again, thanks to VUCA for sending me that. And I have another video done. I just have to edit it, which is a review of new issue, I believe, of War Diary magazine, which is a very nice looking magazine, which is the only wargaming magazine that I'm aware of that doesn't burden itself with including a game in every issue. So it's worth checking out, and you can get it digitally too, which is pretty nice. So that, if that's not along this week, it'll be along in the next few weeks. That just, the timing was bad on that. So thanks everybody for coming tonight. Hopefully this showed up on Facebook. I don't know if it did or not. We had problems with that prior to the stream. Otherwise, we will be back next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. I'd like to wish everybody a great night. Please do thumbs up the video. Please do subscribe to the channel if you are not already subscribed. Thanks everyone for your support. Reminder that everybody who came by and watched the video tonight is helping to support the channel. Everybody that contributes to the chat, which is great. This is not Roger. Ask me about this next time, because this is worth exploring this question, but we're out of time tonight. So once again, thanks everybody, and we'll see you all next time.